Observe the woman making her way up the drive of 847 Milbrook Lane. She is 31-year-old Cynthia Bowen. The time is 7:42 in the morning on October the 12th, and she is holding a canvas bag containing her cleaning equipment. She is an employee of a regional housekeeping service, and this home is her third client of the week. She has serviced this residence on 2 previous occasions. The client is a reserved, well-mannered man who settles his account in cash and provides meticulous notes directing her to specific rooms. The October air is sharp and the sky is clear. Cynthia takes one final look at her phone before walking to the front entrance. 3 more properties are on her schedule today. Her daughter has a soccer game at 6 o'clock. In her head, she is already calculating the travel path that will ensure she arrives on time. Now, she is at the front door. The key is under the welcome mat, precisely where she was told it would be. She turns the key in the lock, opens the door, and steps over the threshold. Less than 90 seconds later, Cynthia Bowen would be back outside, desperate for air, her hands trembling as she dialed 911. Within 6 minutes, the initial patrol unit would pull up to the scene. Responding officers Nathan Cross and Lydia Hammond would make a tactical approach to the house. They were on site for what the dispatch operator had logged as a welfare check under suspicious circumstances. Within 8 minutes of their arrival, both officers would exit the building and immediately request backup. Officer Cross would be visibly ashen. Officer Hammond would later testify that it was the most horrific scene she had witnessed in her 9 years as a patrol officer. This was not a check on a person's welfare. This was now a crime scene. And what was discovered inside 847 Milbrook Lane would uncover a pattern of violence that had gone unnoticed for more than 18 months. The house at 847 Milbrook Lane is situated within the Riverside Heights subdivision of Ashland, Ohio. It is a peaceful area with modest family homes built in the late 1990s. The streets are shaded by trees, the lawns are well tended, and on weekends, children can be seen riding their bicycles. It's the sort of neighborhood where people acknowledge each other with a wave, and where anything out of the ordinary simply doesn't occur. The legal owner of the property was Curtis Langford, a 43-year-old logistics coordinator for a local shipping firm. He took possession of the house in 2019, soon after he moved from Pittsburgh to Ashland for his job. A review of public documents confirmed he was the sole resident. His mortgage was paid, and his property taxes were never late. To the people living around him, Curtis Langford was an unremarkable figure. He was a private man, but he was pleasant enough during brief encounters. He cut his grass on a regular basis. He owned a gray Honda sedan. He kept predictable work hours, and his home was usually dark by 10 o'clock at night. Every indication suggested a life of complete normalcy. Then on October 10th, Curtis Langford did not report for his shift at work. At Midwest Freight Solutions, his supervisor, a woman by the name of Paige Dunham, tried his cell phone on several occasions. All of her calls went directly to his voicemail. The emails she sent were not returned. By that afternoon, on October 11th, the Human Resources Department had flagged his non-attendance as irregular. Not once during his 4 years of service had Langford ever missed a day of work without notice. Paige Dunham felt a sense of unease, but not yet panic. People fall ill. Unexpected emergencies happen. She worked under the assumption that he would eventually appear with a valid reason. But Curtis Langford's phone remained powered off. His email account stayed silent. And on the morning of October the 12th, Cynthia Bowen turned the lock on his front door and entered a waking nightmare. The call to 911 was received at 7:44 a.m. The operator began, "911? What's your emergency?" Cynthia's reply was tense and breathless. She was audibly struggling to breathe. "I'm at a client's home, and something is terribly wrong. There is. I don't know the words for this. There's blood. There is just so much blood." The dispatcher proceeded with a series of routine questions. Was she currently in any danger? Was another person present inside the house? Had she sustained any injuries? Cynthia reported that she was standing on the front lawn. She was not hurt. She did not know if the home was still occupied. She had not proceeded beyond the entryway. Officers Cross and Hammond arrived at 7:50 a.m. Cynthia was found sitting on the curb, phone clutched in her hand. She gestured toward the ajar front door and informed them that she could not bring herself to go back inside. The officers drew closer to the residents with their hands near their firearms. As they entered, Cross announced their presence. There was no answer. A deep silence permeated the house. The entrance hall opened into a small living room. The furniture had been thrown about. A coffee table was overturned. A shattered lamp lay on the ground, and there was blood staining the carpet. On the walls, visible spatter patterns suggested a violent act, not some kind of accident. Hammond requested a supervisor and additional units over her radio. Cross advanced deeper into the home, clearing each room as he went. The kitchen bore the signs of a violent confrontation. Broken ceramics were on the floor, A chair was toppled over, and a kitchen knife block was missing 2 of its blades. In the hallway leading toward the bedrooms, the blood evidence was more substantial. It was pooled heavily near the bathroom door. The bathroom itself was a scene of complete devastation. More blood covered the tile in the sink, and a smear of it was dragged across the mirror. But there was no victim. Cross and Hammond exited the residence and established a perimeter. Within 15 minutes, Detective Sergeant Paul Ridgway arrived on the scene, along with forensic investigators and several other patrol cars. 847 Milbrook Lane had officially become the epicenter of a major investigation. The only piece missing from the puzzle was Curtis Langford himself. With 22 years on the Ashland police force, Detective Ridgway had seen more than his share of darkness. He possessed a deliberate and exhaustive approach, standing on the lawn of 847 Milbrook Lane, absorbing the perimeter as forensic specialists meticulously processed the interior. The sheer quantity of blood pointed to a grim conclusion, a catastrophic injury, or a life violently ended. All signs indicated a violent struggle, a physical altercation of some kind. Yet the lack of a body introduced an unsettling. Ridgway's initial interview was with Cynthia Bowen, who stated she was a contractor for Sparkle Safe Cleaning Service, assigned to the residence on a bi-monthly basis. She characterized her client, Curtis Langford, as consistently formal and emotionally removed. All scheduling was handled impersonally via the company's application, with cash payment left in an envelope, and he was invariably absent whenever she worked. This was her 5th visit to the house, and on the previous 4 occasions, it had been meticulously neat and utterly mundane. The scene today was the antithesis of tidy. It was anything but unremarkable, prompting Ridgway to pivot his focus entirely onto the man who called this place home, Curtis Langford. A deep dive into his background yielded nothing. A clean record with no prior offenses, protection orders, or domestic disturbances logged at the address. Langford was also a digital ghost, absent from all social media. An analysis of his finances painted a picture of ordinary life, a steady income from his job, and unremarkable patterns of expenditure. A 6-month review of his cellular activity revealed minimal outbound communication, primarily professional, with a small number of calls directed to his aging mother in Pittsburgh. His life in Ashland was one of profound isolation. He maintained no close friendships and had no known romantic entanglements. He was an enigma, a phantom living an unseen existence. Yet the evidence was irrefutable. Another person was in this house. A violent confrontation occurred in the living room, and a significant amount of blood was shed in the bathroom. The investigation pivoted sharply at 2:15 in the afternoon, when forensic technician Monica Driscoll uncovered the first piece of truly significant evidence. Deep in the cellar, an area Curtis Langford had repurposed as a personal workshop, Driscoll unearthed a discovery that would irrevocably alter the course of the case. The entrance to the basement was a single staircase leading down from the kitchen. Upon their arrival, officers had found the door shut, and it had stayed that way through the preliminary search of the premises. As Ridgway and Driscoll made their way down into the subterranean level, they entered a completed cellar featuring polished concrete floors, lit by the cold glow of fluorescent tubes, with a long workbench spanning the length of one wall. The workbench itself was a study in precision. Every tool was perfectly arrayed on a pegboard, while labeled plastic containers were neatly stacked. It was a space where order was paramount. Yet, against the distant wall, partially obscured by a configuration of industrial metal shelves, Driscoll's trained eye caught an anomaly. It was a solid steel door, fitted with a substantial deadbolt. The locking mechanism was positioned on the exterior. Ridgway immediately requested backup. The door was meticulously photographed, and its condition recorded before a pair of bolt cutters severed the lock. The space on the other side measured roughly 10 feet by 12 feet. It was a windowless concrete box, illuminated by a solitary, exposed light bulb. Its contents were sparse and chilling: a slender cot covered by a meager mattress, a plastic pail, a foldable metal chair, and implements of confinement. These included industrial-grade zip ties and heavy chains affixed directly to the concrete wall. A sharp chemical odor of bleach hung in the air, failing to mask a more sinister scent beneath. Lying on the floor beside the cot was a single, heavily used woman's athletic shoe, a size 7, colored pink and white. Standing at the threshold of that small room, Ridgway had a moment of chilling clarity. He knew precisely what this place represented, and it was not Curtis Langford's residence. It was his dungeon. By 4 o'clock that afternoon, 847 Milbrook Lane was inundated with a massive law enforcement presence. The Federal Bureau of Investigation's Cleveland Field Office received an alert, as multiple forensic units began a painstaking examination of the entire property. Judicial warrants were promptly served to search Langford's car, his place of employment, and to seize his phone and all digital records. That room in the basement narrated a silent, terrifying story. A person had been held captive within its walls, their freedom taken by force. The bloodstains on the main floor suggested a desperate act of resistance. But the identity and current whereabouts of this individual remained a mystery. Ridgway gathered his investigative team to outline their immediate objectives. First, to identify any and all possible victims, and second, to find Curtis Langford. Their final priority was to ascertain if they were dealing with a kidnapping in progress or a different, unknown scenario. The investigation's first major lead surfaced from Langford's work computer. Digital forensics expert Angela Brennan gained access to Langford's corporate email account, uncovering a secret life. He was managing numerous fraudulent profiles across a variety of dating sites and social networks. His fabricated personas were designed to attract a specific demographic, women in their 20s. He specifically preyed upon newcomers to the city, those expressing a desire for connection, and individuals who wrote online about their loneliness or making a fresh start. Langford's approach was disturbingly systematic. He operated under various aliases and constructed detailed, fictitious life stories for each. He masqueraded as an accomplished entrepreneur, a world-traveling photographer, or an academic postgraduate. His written communications were crafted to be exceptionally charismatic. His patience was a key component of his strategy. He would meticulously cultivate a sense of trust over time before suggesting an in-person meeting. Brennan's analysis uncovered contacts with no fewer than 12 different women over the preceding 18 months. While the majority ceased communication early on, 4 of them had consented to meet him face-to-face. Ridgway immediately ran the names of these women against databases for missing persons reports filed in Ohio and all adjacent states. The system returned 2 immediate hits. The first was Briana Wolf, who was 26 years of age at the time of her disappearance on March 18th. Her new life in Canton, Ohio, had begun just 3 months prior, with a nursing job at Mercy Hospital. Following a painful separation, she was navigating life solo, attempting to start over completely on her own. A digital connection was made with a man using the name David Hartley, who presented himself as the owner of a boutique consulting agency. They had been corresponding for 2 weeks. The man came across as considerate and humorous, showing what appeared to be sincere interest in her profession and personal story. On March 18th, Briana mentioned to a colleague that she was meeting him for coffee. Hopeful yet wary, she made a promise to send a text message upon her safe return home. That message was never received. 2 days passed before her family filed a missing person report after she missed a scheduled shift at work and her phone went unanswered. The Canton police investigation stalled with very little information to go on. Her vehicle was discovered abandoned in the parking area of a Massillon coffee house, a 20-minute drive from her residence and 30 minutes away from Ashland. Surveillance video captured her entering a gray sedan at approximately 2:30 p.m. The vehicle's license plate was unreadable. The identity of the person behind the wheel remained a mystery. The trail of evidence vanished, and the case went cold. On July 9th, another young woman, 23-year-old Sierra Caldwell, disappeared without a trace. A recent graphic design graduate from Kent State University, she was taking on freelance projects while searching for a permanent position and shared an apartment in Akron with 2 other people. She had been communicating through the internet with an individual named Marcus Fielding, who claimed to operate his own independent design firm. He expressed admiration for her body of work and proposed a freelance assignment, leading them to schedule a meeting at his supposed office to go over the project details. Sierra departed from her apartment at 11 a.m. On the morning of July 9th, she informed her roommates of her expected return by 3 o'clock, filled with anticipation for the professional prospect. She never returned. That same evening, her roommates contacted the authorities to report her missing. The Akron Police Department launched an inquiry. Her cell phone was later recovered from a trash receptacle located behind a commercial plaza in Medina, a town situated midway between Akron and Ashland. Inside the phone's case were her wallet and keys. The investigation yielded no eyewitnesses, no video evidence, and no actionable clues. This investigation, too, grew cold. In the command center, Detective Ridgway mapped out the sequence of events on a large whiteboard. A clear methodology began to emerge for a man named Curtis Langford. His targets were women who were socially isolated and recent arrivals to the region. Over several weeks of digital correspondence, he would cultivate a sense of security. He would then schedule a rendezvous in a non-threatening public space like a cafe, an office park, or a public garden, and it was from there that he would abduct them. Briana Wolf had vanished in March. Sierra Caldwell was taken in July. Ridgway held a growing suspicion that these were not the only victims. He believed there were other women whose disappearances had gone unreported, perhaps because their families resided in distant places. There were likely women whose absence was known, but had never been linked to a larger, sinister pattern. Evidence from the basement indicated it had been used not long ago. Forensic investigators had carefully gathered samples of hair, fingerprints, and other biological material, all of which required extensive time for analysis. Yet, the discovery of a single pink and white sneaker strongly implied a recent victim's presence. If that room had held either Briana or Sierra, their current whereabouts were a terrifying unknown. And a critical question remained: what event 2 days prior had triggered the violent struggle in the upper level of the house? By 6 p.m. on October 12th, the face of Curtis Langford was being broadcast on every television news station across the state of Ohio. The photograph, sourced from his company identification badge, depicted an unremarkable man with short brown hair, slender glasses, and a vacant expression. He had the appearance of an office worker, the kind of anonymous face you might encounter on a busy street and forget moments later. A statewide bulletin, similar in urgency to an Amber Alert, was immediately disseminated to the public. Law enforcement was engaged in a manhunt for Langford while also searching for any other possible victims. The tip lines were inundated with calls, but the majority proved to be dead ends, mistaken sightings at fuel stations, supermarkets, and highway rest areas. However, a single call that came in at 7:23 p.m. would alter the entire course of the investigation. The caller identified herself as Felicia Grant, placing the call from a medical facility in Columbus, located 70 miles south of Ashland. She reported that a young woman had been admitted to the emergency department earlier that day, suffering from dehydration and injuries, and was incapable of coherent speech. This patient carried no identification. She had been discovered disoriented and walking along Route 42, just on the outskirts of Delaware, Ohio. A driver passing by had pulled over and dialed 911. For the entire day, the hospital staff had been trying to determine who she was. Upon seeing the news broadcast about Curtis Langford and the disturbing events at the Ashland house, Felicia Grant made a critical connection. The unidentified woman in the hospital bed exhibited an intense fear of all male personnel. She recoiled from any abrupt motions. Furthermore, when a nurse removed the woman's footwear to inspect her feet, it was observed that one shoe was absent. All she had on one foot was a single pink and white sneaker. At 9:15 p.m., Detective Ridgway reached Columbus Metropolitan Hospital. The young woman was located in a private room on the 4th floor, under the watch of both hospital security and an officer from the Columbus Police Force. A specially trained victim advocate and a trauma counselor were present with her in the room. Ridgway's first conversation was with the attending doctor. The physician confirmed the patient was suffering from severe dehydration. She was also malnourished and bore numerous injuries indicative of being physically bound, including ligature marks on her wrists and ankles, as well as contusions across her arms and torso. An injury to her head was also present, one that appeared to have been inflicted several days prior. Her condition was stable, yet she was depleted, consumed by a profound trauma. Upon Ridgway's entry, he found her perched rigidly in the hospital bed, her gaze fixed on the blank wall before her. A frail figure, her complexion was pallid, and her long dark hair was a knotted, unkempt mass. Dressed in standard hospital attire, she held her hands clasped in her lap. Ridgway approached cautiously, identifying himself in a measured tone from across the room. He exercised restraint, allowing the victim advocate to speak. The advocate assured her that Detective Ridgway was there to uncover the truth, that her ordeal was over, and she was finally secure. At last, her eyes found a focal point. Her gaze settled on Ridgway, and from her throat came a raw, raspy whisper. "My name is Sierra Caldwell." For 93 days, Sierra Caldwell had been a captive in the cellar at 847 Milbrook Lane. She recounted her experience to Ridgway and the advocate, her memory delivering the narrative in disjointed, broken pieces. The encounter with Curtis Langford had occurred on July 9th, unfolding precisely as he had orchestrated. The destination, however, was not his office, but a residence in Ashland. He had administered a sedative, lacing the bottle of water she accepted from him during the drive. Her consciousness returned in a subterranean room, where she found herself bound and utterly confused. Langford had made it her prison. His dominion was absolute. He dictated when she received sustenance, when she was permitted light, and when she was plunged into darkness, all while maintaining a near-total silence. No reason was ever offered for her captivity. He merely confined her. An attempt at freedom came in August, prompted by an unlocked door and apparent oversight by Langford. She managed to ascend the basement stairs, reaching the very top before he intercepted her flight. Her retribution was 3 days of starvation. Then, 2 days prior, on October 10th, a shift occurred in the grim routine. Langford had descended into the basement that morning, appearing disturbed and unfocused. For a second time, he had failed to secure the steel door. It was open just a sliver. Sierra remained still until she detected his movements in the kitchen above, and then she bolted, surging up the basement steps. She burst through the kitchen with Langford in close pursuit. A violent struggle ensued in the living room. In desperation, Sierra seized a lamp, bringing it down hard against his skull. He collapsed to the floor amid a spray of blood. his fate uncertain to her. She fled through the front door and did not look back. Her escape was a frantic blur through the residential area, cutting across yards and down unfamiliar streets. Her feet were bare when she finally stumbled upon the highway. When a vehicle pulled over, terror gripped her, the fear that Langford had found her. She took off once more, running until her body gave out. Her memory of what followed was a haze of sounds, flashing lights, and the sensation of being lifted into an ambulance. Ridgway absorbed her account, documenting the details. He reassured Sierra that she was now secure and had acted with incredible courage. Then he posed the single most critical question: was there anyone else inside that house? Sierra shut her eyes. Tears welled and fell as she opened them again. "Briana," she breathed. The name was Briana. Sierra informed Ridgway that another woman, Briana Wolfe, was already in the basement when she was first brought there in July. Briana's captivity had begun months earlier, in March, aligning perfectly with the established timeline. She was frail, skeletal, and could hardly form words. For 3 weeks, Langford held them in the same room. He provided only meager amounts of food and water. He offered no explanation for his motives or his intentions. He just imprisoned them in the darkness. Then, one evening in late July, Langford removed Briana from the room. Sierra recalled hearing noises from above, the sound of a closing door, and a vehicle's engine turning over. Briana was never seen again. From that moment on, Sierra had been the sole occupant of the room. A cold dread settled in Ridgway's gut. The ramifications of this revelation were catastrophic. He pressed Sierra for any information about Briana's destination, but she had none. He questioned if Langford had ever revealed his plans. He had not. The man was a cipher, operating with a chilling precision, silence, and a complete absence of feeling. At 11:47 p.m., Ridgway dispatched an emergency alert to every available unit. The status of Curtis Langford was no longer merely a missing persons case. He was considered armed, extremely dangerous, and possibly holding another captive. Locating him before he could inflict further harm became the absolute priority. Over the next 24 hours, a sweeping manhunt for Curtis Langford was orchestrated by law enforcement agencies throughout Ohio. His car, a gray 2016 Honda Accord, was discovered at 6:30 a.m. on October 13th. It was found in a long-term parking structure at Cleveland Hopkins International Airport. The vehicle was immediately secured and processed for any forensic evidence. Inside the trunk, forensic specialists discovered trace quantities of blood. They also recovered a roll of duct tape, a bundle of zip ties, and a plastic tarp. Tucked away in the glove compartment was Briana Wolfe's driver's license. Authorities began scrutinizing the airport's surveillance recordings. The footage showed Langford parking his vehicle on October 11th at 3:22 a.m. This was approximately 15 hours after Sierra's escape, yet he had never boarded an aircraft. No documentation existed of him ever proceeding through the security checkpoint. The abandoned car was a deliberate act of deception. The scope of the search broadened. Officers canvassed bus terminals, train stations, and car rental companies. They systematically checked motels within a 50-mile radius. They investigated his known associates, a list that proved to be exceptionally short. Ridgway theorized that Langford had retreated to a place of familiarity. He would be hiding somewhere he perceived as a sanctuary. He issued subpoenas for Langford's financial statements and the GPS data from his phone. At 4:18 p.m. on October 13th, a distinct pattern began to surface. In the city of Pittsburgh resided Elaine Langford, the mother of Curtis Langford. She was a widow of 71, and her health was in steady decline. When authorities made contact, she was fully cooperative, yet utterly shattered by the inquiry. Her last conversation with her son had occurred 3 weeks earlier. He had called just to see how she was doing, and his demeanor had seemed entirely normal. Elaine then informed investigators about a family cabin near Grove City in western Pennsylvania, where Curtis often spent his summers. The property had once belonged to her deceased husband. Curtis was now the only family member who ever went there. She provided the location. At 6:55 p.m., Pennsylvania State Police and FBI agents converged on the cabin at 421 Timberidge Road. The location was remote, set deep off the main thoroughfare, and completely encircled by dense forest. A lone gravel drive led toward a small, dilapidated structure with peeling paint and gutters hanging loose from the roofline. The gray Honda owned by Curtis Langford was absent, but a different vehicle was positioned near the cabin. It was a white Ford pickup truck registered to a man named Eugene Slater, a hunting guide whose residence was 20 miles away. Authorities ran a check on the license plates. Slater had reported that very truck stolen just 2 days prior. Tactical teams formed a perimeter around the cabin. Lights were visible inside. Smoke drifted up from the chimney. Through a megaphone, the lead agent's voice cut through the air. "Curtis Langford, this is the FBI. Come out with your hands visible." There was no reply. The command was issued a second time. An unnerving silence persisted. At 7:34 p.m., agents breached the front door. Curtis Langford was seated in a wooden chair positioned near the fireplace. His hands were calmly folded in his lap. His face was a mask of utter vacancy. Beside him on the floor rested a hunting rifle. Agents took him into custody without any resistance. He remained silent. He did not fight back. His gaze was simply fixed on a wall. The cabin was then methodically searched. In a bedroom at the back of the structure, investigators discovered Briana Wolfe. She was alive, but just barely. She was restrained to a metal bed frame with plastic zip ties. She was in a state of severe malnutrition, extreme dehydration, and was completely unresponsive. Emergency medical technicians were dispatched immediately. She was evacuated to Grove City Hospital, where she was admitted in critical condition. Briana Wolfe had been held in captivity for 209 days. Curtis Langford was transported to the Ashland Police Department, where he was detained for interrogation. He was informed of his Miranda rights. He asked for a lawyer. For a period of 6 hours, Langford sat inside an interview room and uttered not a single word. He did not request a drink of water. He did not inquire as to his fate. He simply remained seated, hands clasped, staring at the surface of the table. Detective Ridgway employed several different tactics. He confronted Langford with the evidence: the room in the basement, Sierra's testimony, Briana's medical state. He asked about his motive. He asked how many victims there were. He asked if there were any others out there. Langford remained completely mute. His court-appointed attorney, a public defender named Harold Kessler, instructed him to maintain his silence. Kessler offered no insights into his client's state of mind and appeared as profoundly disturbed by the evidence as anyone involved in the case. At 2 o'clock in the morning on October 14th, the interrogation came to an end. Curtis Langford was formally charged with 2 counts of kidnapping, 2 counts of aggravated assault, 2 counts of unlawful restraint, in addition to numerous other felonies. Bail was denied. He was remanded to the county jail to await his trial. He still had not spoken a single word. Sierra Caldwell's recovery required a 3-week hospital stay to address her physical wounds. The psychological trauma, however, would demand much more time. She was attended to by her family, by advocates for victims, and by therapists who focused on recovery from severe trauma. She provided investigators with additional statements. She delivered testimony before a grand jury. She was composed, articulate, and wholly committed to seeing justice served. But restful sleep eluded her. She could no longer tolerate being in small, enclosed rooms. She could not bear to be alone in the dark. Briana Wolfe's journey to recovery was significantly more complex. She had endured catastrophic physical deterioration, including malnutrition, dehydration, and systemic infections. She spent many weeks under constant observation in intensive care. Her family maintained a constant vigil at her hospital bedside. When she was finally stable enough to speak, she recounted her memories for investigators. Langford had imprisoned her in the basement for several months. He had relocated her to the cabin in the final weeks of July. He held her there in total isolation until the day that law enforcement arrived. She had absolutely no understanding of his motives. Langford had provided no explanation. He had simply held her captive. Both women had survived their ordeal, but their survival was marked by a cost that no prison sentence could ever truly settle. The trial of Curtis Langford started on March 3rd. The prosecution laid out a mountain of irrefutable evidence. This included forensic data and the powerful testimony of the victims. They also presented physical evidence from the residence and the remote cabin. The defense did not attempt to refute the facts of the case. They argued a defense of diminished capacity instead. They submitted evidence of Langford's profoundly troubled childhood, a history of emotional neglect, and extreme social isolation. They suggested an undiagnosed mental illness was at play. They contended that he was not in full possession of his faculties or in control of his actions. The prosecution acknowledged these circumstances, but pointed to the methodical planning behind the crimes. Langford had meticulously crafted fake online identities. He had deliberately targeted women in vulnerable situations. He had engineered a prison cell within his basement. He had moved Briana to a second location to thwart discovery. These were not the behaviors of a person who was unable to comprehend the difference between right and wrong. The lead prosecutor, Timothy Hargrove, was blunt in his closing statement. Trauma may serve to explain a person's behavior. It does not, however, justify it. Curtis Langford was a man of deliberate actions. He made the conscious decision to stalk his prey, to weave a web of deceit, and to hold others captive. For these calculated choices, he would be brought to justice. For 9 hours, the jury weighed the evidence. Their conclusion was unanimous. Curtis Langford was guilty on all charges. In the courtroom, Judge Raymond Kirkland delivered the final verdict, sentencing Langford to 2 consecutive life terms in prison, completely stripping away any possibility of parole. The rest of Langford's days would unfold behind bars. When the court offered him a chance to speak, he chose silence. He offered no explanation and no remorse. Sierra Caldwell began a new life far from Ohio, adopting a different name to escape her past. She embraced therapy and began the difficult journey of reconstructing her world according to her own design. She turned down nearly all interview requests, speaking only once to champion stronger safety protocols for women navigating the world of online dating. She was determined that her survival would serve a greater purpose. For Briana Wolf, the road to healing was a quieter one. She remained enveloped by her family and poured her energy into her mental and physical recovery. She never spoke to the media about the ordeal. She craved only seclusion. She sought only peace. The essential truth is that both women survived. That is the victory that overshadows all else. The case sent shockwaves through the state, prompting Ohio legislators to introduce a bill that mandated identity verification and enhanced safety features on dating applications. The legislation was named the Sierra Caldwell Act. It received unanimous approval. The house at 847 Milbrook Lane was razed to the ground in late 2024. The land was left barren. No one was willing to build a home on soil so deeply stained by human horror. The single sneaker, pink and white, which Sierra lost in her desperate bid for freedom, was processed as evidence before it was finally returned to her possession. The shoe was hers. It had always been hers. When officers first crossed the threshold at 847 Milbrook Lane, they recoiled almost immediately because they grasped the true nature of the scene before them. It was not just a place where a crime had occurred, it was a predator's hunting ground. The chilling reality was that Curtis Langford had concealed himself in the open, seamlessly integrated into a quiet residential street. He had performed monstrous acts in a secret basement beneath a home that betrayed no secrets. 2 women managed to break free. 2 women are now rebuilding their shattered lives. 2 women are forging new identities that refuse to be defined by the violence inflicted upon them. The files are now closed, and the case is considered officially resolved. But the unsettling questions linger. How many other individuals did Langford make contact with? How many women intuitively felt something was wrong and declined to meet? How many other near tragedies unfolded that the world will never be aware of? The answers to these questions will likely remain buried forever. Yet Sierra Caldwell and Briana Wolf are alive and breathing. They are no longer captives, and Curtis Langford will never again be in a position to cause harm. That finality must serve as its own form of justice. Every day, millions of people search for connection online, through apps, across glowing screens, and most of the time, that connection is genuine. But sometimes, hiding behind a charming message and a borrowed smile, there is a predator. Sierra Caldwell was 23 years old, hopeful, talented. She believed a stranger's words carefully crafted to disarm her, to make her feel seen. That trust cost her 93 days of her life. Briana Wolf was 26, a nurse. Starting over, she never came home from a coffee date. She spent 209 days in captivity before anyone found her. These women did nothing wrong. The monster who hunted them did everything deliberately, building fake identities, targeting the lonely, the new, the vulnerable. Here is what we must carry forward. Before you meet a stranger from the internet, tell someone where you're going. Share their profile. Drive yourself. Trust the feeling in your gut when something feels off, because that feeling has saved lives. Sierra escaped. She fought back with bare feet and broken hands. She didn't just survive, she inspired a law that now protects others. Your safety is not paranoia, it is power. You are not just a profile, you are irreplaceable, and the world cannot afford to lose you.